Ludus Vulpes.
Welcome to Ludus Vulpes. My name's Kirsty.
I'm Phil.
I'm Matt.
You join us for our third episode of Gaming Gossip. And today we're discussing crowdfunding, how the hobby has been affected by crowdfunding, and the past, present and future for crowdfunding. Crowdfunding examples would be Kickstarter, GameFound, etc. So, Matt, would you like to give us a bit more of a background on crowdfunding?
Crowdfunding, how exciting! Kickstarter, everyone's favourite term.
Yeah. If you haven't heard of Kickstarter yet, where have you been? Anyway,
You are very guilty.
I knew when we picked this topic that this would.
Of introducing me. Have you seen the Kickstarter app, Matt? No, what's that, Phil? You can officially call me Matt Superbacker now.
Yes, you have that badge.
Yeah, when Matt first got into the hobby, he was like, I was like, oh yeah, so I've got this game off Kickstarter, it's on its way. And you were like, what's Kickstarter? I was like, have a look at this. Matt hasn't turned back since.
Yeah, so it's a way in which creators can bring their games to life by asking for support of the community. So everybody essentially chips into one pot. Kickstarter are the agents who I think take about 10% of the pot value and then pass those funds on to the creators to hopefully, in most cases, make games. There are a few examples we might be able to turn up tonight where that doesn't always happen. But by and large, it's always been a positive experience, 99% of the time. You have to be very, very patient, in particular with everything that's going on in the world and shipping and things like that. What have you been backing lately, Phil?
I mean, there's stuff that's outstanding, still on its way. So, John's Company Second Edition, which that was really exciting when that came to Kickstarter, broadly because it didn't look necessarily going to get a reprint. So actually, to take it to Kickstarter to do the reprint, and also that part of that Kickstarter was bundling Pax Premium, which I've not got, so that's on there as well.
Good.
Nice.
A good bundle.
It's a tricky one because of the topic it covers, and in the old-fashioned way of thinking and events, it's not a traditional game a distributor would pick up and put into stores. So it's a good example of how people are using Kickstarters to bring unique and unusual themes to the market.
Yeah, and I think that for me the one thing that I'd like re-emphasise what Matt said is Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general is very much about backing something that can be developed. Like it's not finished when you back it.
Yeah,
it's yet to be polished, and it's that opportunity that the funds that come in allow it to be polished, and actually the backers can also contribute. And there's some good examples of games that have grown and developed through some super backer support. I kick myself for one of my Kickstarters. I kick myself for a Kickstarter. That's interesting. But I backed the latest the Zombicide Wild West thing.
Yeah.
The only Zombicide I've ever backed. And I'll come on to why I'll kick myself with that one a little bit later on. But yeah, how about you, Matt? What's on the daily checklist at the moment?
There's quite a few good games. I did also back the Zombicide one, which I've never backed before. That was interesting. I should have brought my phone over and you could have a highlight reel of what's in the throws. There's a few that I'm expecting at the moment. One called Legend, which is about a family business and it gets passed down between new generations. That looks really good. I've been waiting patiently for 2 years for the new Tokaido game called Namiji.
How are you feeling about that? How's the community feeling?
For a professional company, and I'll never forget the one comment. There was a comment after I backed it said, "Just to let everyone know, I've backed this company before. You will not be receiving this in the very near future, so just knuckle down."
Yeah.
But I think typically they do the updates, and not getting the updates on Kickstarter can be a problem. So we don't get the information as to what stage of development the item is at, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, you've put money in. You want to know what's being done with the money you put in. And to me, when I back something on Kickstarter, with the possible exception of Zombicide, I'm tend to be backing it to see something come to fruition, to see a game come to fruition, and to see how that progresses and how that thinking might change during like post game development, and having updates from the designers talking about what new artwork maybe they put into the game and those kind of things. I think it's fantastic to see that happen and see that evolution. But when the money's in and nothing's coming back, that can be really frustrating.
Well, what I'll pick up on that is the one bad experience I've had is a company called Draw Lab, who have made some amazing coins. Okay. They've run 5 or 6 Kickstarters. It always delivers. The product is always exceptionally good, but would never use them again just because they don't update people. One of their updates, I replied to the update saying, "Thank you for the update. You've clearly updated us just to let us know you've started a new Kickstarting campaign, which I will not be backing." That's how shallow it is.
That's really bad.
And they just don't get the fact that updating every 4 or 5 months just isn't acceptable. And I look forward to receiving the item, but just because I wasn't getting updates, I've said, "Wow, it's just not for me in the future." It's a shame, really.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, I think, with Kickstarter, that you need to accept that you're taking a risk. I've had one project that hasn't delivered.
That's interesting,
which was about 150 quid. That's basically down the drain. That's fine. It's the risk you take when you try and get a game to fruition, I guess. And you see a project you like, a project you're interested in, a project that you'd like to see more of. You put some money in, you back it, and it is forever disappointing to scroll down my backed projects list and see that one unfulfilled. And it'll never be fulfilled. It's just it's done now. And then you've got the cynical hat that says the guy just grabbed the money and ran. I'm not naming names and I'm not naming games. Grabbed the money and ran, or that actually there were problems in development, money ran out and couldn't afford to fund it any further.
That's an entirely realistic possibility. I think it takes on average 28 months to bring a game from idea to the store, so it's a long period and could easily be mismanaged. Yeah, absolutely, that's correct, it's a good point. And the one that I don't think I'm going to get the game is unfortunately a very reputable company called Watch Your Game. They're doing a Madeira collector's edition. It's been a couple of years now and it's not looking promising. Another 5 months gone by with no updates. But they had a good reputation as well, which is a shame. But it looks like that one's not going to.
That's a shame.
One of your favourites was a Kickstarter this year, Cascadia, wasn't it?
Cascadia. That was a Kickstarter. Yeah. In fact, actually, I've been saying it's a Kickstarter, and I realised today when I was looking through my phone, it was actually a game found. So it was one that was on Kickstarter and Game Found.
It's another company, isn't it? Game Found. I've done a couple with Game Found. I've just done Palaces of Carrera with them, I think, which was a reprint. But you know what? It's a famous game. Didn't have to go to Kickstarter. It could have quite easily been picked up and put in the stores. It's got a very good reputation. It would have sold just as well.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yes.
So, shall we talk a little bit about... I think we talked broadly about Kickstarter. Should we talk about what
Shall I tell you about my little projects that I've got coming on Kickstarter?
Yeah, go for it.
So, Ice by This Way Games. That's one that I'm looking forward to receiving from Kickstarter.
Exciting dynamics.
Very
beautiful artwork.
Yeah. Wow. Multi-layers, and you're literally picking through the ice to get to the different layers, which is, I think, it's just a fantastic idea for a game. And fantastic to see, especially with Ice, for me, it was one of the earlier ones that I backed, and I was a bit like, I don't know, it's a bit of money. Should I, shouldn't I? At the time I didn't have that much money. Do you know what, actually, it's a beautiful game, I want to do it. And I'm so pleased that I did. When we went to Essen, we managed to meet the creators and designers, and not only are they going to successfully deliver the game, but they've managed to make their own publishing house, This Way Games, as I mentioned, and they've been able to basically full-time dedicate themselves to creating that game, and then others
on the strength of that one campaign.
Just from that campaign.
That's amazing to hear, really, isn't it? Yeah. That's really, really good.
Others, I think I've got Koi Garden coming.
Beautiful.
Which is a lovely little, tranquil, stunning game.
But do you know what? If they come out, Kirsty, and they don't get the best reviews, or if something happens, you've supported that project, brought it to life, you can probably still sell it for what you paid for it. Yeah. Just generally, they tend to hold them the value once, and you're taking the risk of that might not be a good game.
Yeah.
And people get upset then if you don't sell it to them at the same, you know.
Yeah.
I've took all the risk, I've brought it to life, and they want to sweep in and grab it at a bargain price, and
and the other,
not ideal really.
The other one last year that you backed, which was I think one of the strongest run campaigns from an independent I've ever seen.
Very much so. Yeah. Dog Park.
Dog Park.
So Dog Park is actually a local designer based, I think, in Leamington Spa. Couple, who are based in Leamington Spa, which isn't that far away from where we are, and basically just seemed to begin with a very simple, straightforward card game to begin with. Is you know how it came across, and my original idea was to purchase it for my sister.
Okay.
Get it, and then one day she can have it because her and her boyfriend absolutely adore dogs. She's backed it anyway, so there we go. I'm going to end up keeping that one anyway. But it was such a fantastically done campaign. It was probably, and I have to say, I've got a lot of respect for all the different, producers out there and people who have Kickstarted. But if you're looking to do a Kickstarter, look up Dog Park, because it was one of the best ever campaigns I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was.
They were updating on a weekly basis. I still get updates now on a monthly basis about it. It's been pushed back because they've had that many what are they called?
Backers?
No, not the backers. The
stretch goals?
Yes. That many stretch goals completed.
Yeah.
That to complete them all they've had to push it back.
Oh yeah,
and
to get it all done.
Yeah. And we're talking about, like, not only is it a game, it's become almost like a franchise. We've got bookmarks, we've got artwork, there's this, there's that. There's so much that people were then able to add on.
Yeah.
Because they were doing so well.
It felt like when you looked at that campaign initially that like all the add-on purchases, like bookmarks, deck of cards, because it was like the art from the cards in the game became the deck of playing cards. Yeah. It's like we don't know we're going to do very well, so we're just going to hedge our bets. We're going to put loads of add-ons on, so if people want to boost their pledge, they can. And the game just like the base game just smashed it out of the park and did it. It was just a staggering Kickstarter. It was superbly well.
I think that's one of the reasons why Simon do so well with their games, is that they give a lot of add-ons. But when it all comes, it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of boxes or games that I've received that just come in 8 boxes, and I'm like, well, what do I do with all this? So it's great them advertising the add-ons, but they do.
It was a beautiful moment when you shared a photograph of this tower of boxes that was probably about the same height as you.
Yeah, that's right. It's a Nemesis bundle.
So, interesting, obviously, Seaman is a huge organisation. And then the Dog Park creators were just a small, independent, a couple that were just having probably an artist who wanted to do something in COVID. Let's create a ball game. Someone with a love, a passion for the hobby. Someone like that going to Kickstarter and asking for help to help their dream come true, I agree with, I have to say. People like Seaman, massive organisations, we will talk about others shortly, I'm not so sure they should still be using Kickstarter. Or it should be, we're going to be doing this. If you're interested in this and you want exclusive access to it, pledge a £1 to get the access. So it's a minimal amount.
Yeah.
And then go to them or sign up to some form of loyalty scheme. I'm not so sure it should be through Kickstarter.
So there's a few things there then. There's like, well, why would they still use it? Why, if they have a $2 million campaign, they've got to give 10% away, haven't they? Why would they do that? And
I presume it's audience.
Well, I think one of the things is marketing. It brings, I'm not very often browsing Indiegogo or browsing GameFound. I just know when the ones are there. But Kickstarter, I will just browse, and if there's something small, I've backed decks of cards before and given away as gifts. So there are things that come up and you think, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll have a look at doing that. So I even backed a wallet once on Kickstarter.
Well, I think the point you've made, like a couple of good points. And one of them is if you don't actually look on GameFan, but you'll hear about it. Yeah. And I think the same happens with Kickstarter. If something gets buzz on Kickstarter, it goes, and that happened with Dog Park.
That's right.
It's happened it's happening now. Which will date this video. It's happening now with Simon's current campaign, which is Zombicide Marvel crossover, which has gone staggeringly high.
Staggeringly expensive.
$410 for the
I
all-in
think it
pledge.
proves that it continues to be a luxury hobby, and we're delivering luxury products, aren't we? And someone said in the chat room recently, why are board game tables so expensive? And like, because it's a luxury product. There's no, just go and buy a table.
We made ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
And it's-
300 quid, bit of hard work, bit of graft. You can design it, you can make it fit your own.
Yeah.
Admittedly, ours is a topper, but it means it's multi-use. You
Yeah.
can use it when you want it, and then take it away when you don't.
So I don't want to get into a debate on whether board games should or should not be a luxury hobby.
I've just come up with another idea for a gaming gossip.
maybe. I mean, it's one of those things that actually I think the beauty of board gaming these days is there's so much. The second-hand market is so vibrant. Actually, it doesn't have to be a pure luxury product anymore.
No.
But that's maybe another day. But I think it's when you do look at Kickstarters, and I back Kingdom Death Monster. Hello, I put more money than sense into that project. I will be waiting until the end of my life for everything to be delivered, and I am all right with that. Anyone else who's out there whinging, it's fine. Yeah, well, the delays are the delays, and it's to be expected. But when you see the price tag of $410 for a Zombicide game, you kind of know that if you back it and go all in on it, you'll probably be able to resell it, and you'll resell it either at your purchase price or greater than your purchase price, because that product will go into retail, but it will go in without any of the stretch goals. The stretch goals will be bundled separately and be quite expensive, relatively expensive compared to what they were in the Kickstarter, and therefore if you came to sell your Kickstarter full Zombicide Kickstarter pledge, you'd probably get more money for it than you paid.
So that's
Which is interesting.
Because actually you're suggesting in this current day and age, and interest rates being as low as they are, that the best way to make money is to invest in board games and sell them on.
No, I'm not.
Hashtag not financial advice.
This financial advice is not underwritten by the FCS. Or FCA, I can't remember which it is now. But yeah, but I think your point of whether Simon should or shouldn't be going to Kickstarter is an interesting one, because they are not using it anymore to develop the product. That product is predominantly already developed. Yes, they are using it as predominantly a marketing and pre-order service.
I mean, the Marvel one that you're talking about, are you telling me that they're going to recreate all the artwork for Marvel? No. I don't think so. Marvel Studios have already got the artwork, and trust me, they're going to have been paying for that Marvel artwork.
Well, I mean that when you do crossovers, your IP is going to add pricing, which is probably part of where the $410 comes from. But it is a pre-order service rather than a Kickstarter, I would say.
Yeah.
And it kind of starts to clutter up the world a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of reference to sort of Jamie Stegmaier Stonemaier Games, who started out on Kickstarter, and could have continued on Kickstarter. Like Wingspan would have probably gone off the charts on Kickstarter, especially the way the initial orders got backlogged and everyone was after a copy of it. But
it's got those magic words, isn't it?
Beth. But they came off Kickstarter. They raised the capital to set up a business, and now they work through the distribution model. And I think Jamie's quite open in giving his reasons why that is. But to me, that feels like that's been the right approach. You've taken all the risks, you've had your reward from that risk, and now you're a legit company who can afford to have 50,000 copies of a game produced and put into distribution, and you're still going to make your money out of it.
Well, it flips both ways, I think, because you've stumbled upon a fantastic example of Jamie Stegmaier with Wingspan. He ordered 10,000 copies and had to fulfil 30,000 copies. But if he'd have used Kickstarter in that situation, probably has seen one, because it's expensive. I think it's £30,000 to £40,000 for every single mini for a die cast for the mould. So they want to know how many copies they're going to generate, and it's hard really, because how many do you do? Yeah. But, if you were making a game today, how many copies would you make?
Okay, so
10,000.
Bearing that, if money was an object, 10,000, and you just get it everywhere. Bearing that in mind then, and bearing in mind, so a game which would have no miniatures, a game that, should we say, a designer that is very well known, I think, between all of us and probably most of you out there. So I'm just going to say Shem. Our friend Shem.
I have I love the West Kingdom games. Like, I've got all of them.
Yeah.
Although I've not got the new expansion coming out for Viscounts, which is out at the moment on
I
Kickstarter.
haven't played Viscounts. I'd really like to give it a go. I've heard it's really good.
Yeah.
So I've got all the West Kingdom games. I've played Raiders of the North Sea and a couple of the North Sea trilogy. And they, those games are good games.
Yeah.
I find myself increasingly disillusioned with the way in which those games have been brought to market.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
One, they're a trilogy. They're cardboard and wood. Like, they're not
There's no
big plastic.
miniatures. Yeah.
So they're coming to market as cardboard and wood games, and they're coming as a trilogy. We know they're coming as a trilogy.
Yeah.
That's like, it's preempted. It's up front. Like, if you look at the West Kingdom campaigns, you've got some really frustrating things happening. So you have Architects come out.
Yeah.
Then you have Architects expansion come out. Then you have Paladins and Tome Saga, and then Paladins expansion comes out. Viscounts comes out. We've now got an expansion for Viscounts come out.
There's a lot of stuff coming out, Phil.
They're all being run as separate Kickstarters as well, and I suspect most of those expansions were already well in the pipeline when the initial game went into production. Not necessarily complete, but in the pipeline. And actually, it feels to me like the best way to, because Shane Phillips has now announced there'll be another trilogy. I can't remember what they call it.
Wayfarers.
Wayfarers trilogy.
Yeah.
So, okay, speculative guess. We'll see 6 to 8 Kickstarter campaigns for the Wayfarer stuff.
Yeah.
We'll see the 3 base games. We'll see an expansion, at least 1 expansion for each, maybe 2.
Including empty boxes, don't forget.
Including
because
empty
the boxes are no longer big enough.
Larger empty boxes.
And we'll also see maybe something like Tome Saga that bridges across the 3 games.
Yeah.
So we'll see between 6 and maybe even 9 Kickstarter campaigns where, and this is where the sort of principle of shipping and import costs now become much more of an issue than they ever used to be. The best way for me to buy those Wayfarer games will be to wait until that last expansion is set and then just go all in on all 3 games, all 4 expansions.
There's actually a better way. He's committed that anything he releases on Kickstarter
will go to retail.
So just wait for it. There's no material bonus benefit of backing it on Kickstarter. You do get a nice VAT and shipping bill though.
Which for us in the UK has become more of an issue.
Yes. Yeah.
I think from what I've heard about, there's a pre-production copy going around for some of these expansions that the big reviews have got. And they are very good expansions that add in value and improving them. And what that leads me back to is that on Kickstarter, there are so many games that come out of Kickstarter who haven't play tested their expansions. You're just getting content for content's sake, and you end up with more boxes. I've seen people who have had a full pledge of games and just sold off a couple of expansions because they're not as good as the main game.
Yeah, and you tend to find that, don't you? It's that the need for stretch goals or add-ons, particularly add-ons, which expand the game, and give more content.
And sometimes it's as simple as adding enough content or another player board and more player pieces and the extra tokens required to add an extra player.
You're right.
Little things like that. They can't afford to do more than 1 to 4.
Recently, and there's a couple of brewer games that I would have liked to have backed. But when I looked at what they were giving you in the deluxe version, a larger board, a first player wooden piece, I was like, well, you know what? For the sake of not paying shipping and not paying VAT, I think I'll be happy with the retail version. So I am paying more attention to what you're getting as your deluxe content.
Yeah, and that's what I think the Kickstarter. That's where I'll go to Kickstarter is for the deluxe content.
Yeah, the things that you're going to be able to get for that Kickstarter that anybody purchasing from retail or from that point onwards is not going to have.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is that's where it's different.
A one-off version, doesn't it? You know, it's a one-off version. The company that's doing it really well at Eagle Griffin, they're doing a lot of Vitalis Lacerda's reprints, and they're doing some good.
Might got On Mars coming with the Alien Invaders expansion.
That'll be really good. But yeah, I've got that under my list of positives, in that the deluxe games have over the years I've been playing board games, they have directly influenced the quality of board gaming across the whole spectrum. So board games now are at a higher standard of components and gameplay directly as a result of Kickstarter, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because the deluxe games, I think,
I think it's spot on.
have forced them to raise. So it used to just be Days of Wonder back in the day, where Days of Wonder was the premium release for that year. And they only did one game a year, and that was the benchmark. But I think now, some of the retail stuff, you can't tell the difference between.
So,
Go on.
No, you
I was just going to say that kind of deluxe feel. Yes, you pay for it at Kickstarter, but also I think it's opened a lot of, like we've been raving about Capstone games over the last 12 months. I think the three of us have really enjoyed a lot of their
Thank
releases.
you, Capstone Games.
But also, like they're pitching games at a price point, which is a Kickstarter deluxe price point.
Yeah.
But they're also delivering on that commitment. So you're right. Even games that will only go to retail have upped their bar, and the realization that a retail game can now cost the same as a Kickstarter deluxe version because it's delivered at the same standard.
Yes.
And like a publisher like Capstone hasn't been afraid to deliver at that standard and say, actually, this is a £70 game or a £60 game, and we're not going to reduce our standards just for retail. We're not going to go to Kickstarter to produce a deluxe version. You get
a really good quality version, and it costs this. And if you want it, you want it. If you don't.
Yeah.
And it happens, unfortunately, that it takes such a long time, in particular now, delivering with Kickstarter. I do lose a little bit of interest. And I recently sold my Ankh pledge that I was really looking forward to getting stuck into. It's just like, I want a new thing. So the fact that if it's in retail, I can go and buy it now if I'm interested, that has become, as a seasoned gamer, more appealing. Read about it, buy it, play it. As we've done recently with Ark Nova is a really good example. As opposed to having to wait a year and then see how you feel about it.
It is difficult, and like the volume of great games at retail is, you're not, nowhere in the world are you going to really struggle to buy a great game. Like that's just a fact. So Kickstarter is, an odd little. Not little, it's massive piece for the gaming industry, but it's an oddity almost.
And so it's more than just games on Kickstarter.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but board gaming makes up a third of their revenue apparently at the moment,
which is massive.
Yeah, so it's a big part, and they have tried to make some improvements, but I think Game Found are starting to catch them up, if not overtake them.
Yeah.
For the future of Kickstarter, for me personally, dealing with games, I will probably be looking very closely at the difference between what deluxe content you're getting versus a retail content, and just trying to buy into experienced companies who have got a track record, I think.
And that's interesting, because I would like to fund more inexperienced companies who are trying to bring their passion project to life. And
it's literally taking the topic out of my hands, because I was literally just about to say that. We'll go into that in a minute.
No, it's interesting to say it.
So I was going to say, so we've talked about the big companies, and as someone who hopes to go to Kickstarter later this year, I'm not going to make a secret of that, like, I'd like to try and get a prototype made enough to get to Kickstarter. The pressure on smaller, very small independents, such as myself, us and the little people, to create the stretch goal, to create this, to create that. It's almost the big organisations have made it so that if you don't put stretch goals in, people are like, I don't know if I'm interested in that.
Why bother?
And so it's nice to see that, like, smaller independents and some of the people that I've backed have had things like social media stretch goals. Yeah. Which is quite, it's not that you're not asking any more money, you're just saying, can you share this on you?
But it's the quality of the production at the point at which you're viewing it. So if I can see it's a quality production, and maybe they haven't made anything before, but you're looking at that versus other campaigns, as long as you can see that it's going to hopefully work out. Yeah. I think confidence maybe plays a part. Yeah. How confident are, if you're going to Kickstarter, do you give out review copies to...
I think you're obliged.
I
think these days especially.
It creates the buzz, share that. Like, for me, I want to share that production process when I go to Kickstarter. I want to go, right, look, this is how it was. It started off as Post-it notes being spread across the table. Yeah. Then it was hand-drawn little bits here. Then we got an artist involved. Then we got this. Then we got that. And I want to show people, how the product came from a seed through to an actual piece.
So it's almost like building a community or an ecosystem.
Yeah.
which people like Queen Games have got, and
Yes.
do they take
Yeah.
advantage of it to some degree? Because I'm not very happy with how they run their last campaigns, so I won't be backing any more of their games just because they did a bait and switch on one of their Stefan Fowl games, and this is the game we're making. Completely changed the rule set, and they're making something else now.
Seriously?
Yeah, so,
I didn't know
so
that.
the components are the same,
Yeah.
but they're going with different rules.
That's a
That
tough
can
ask.
They did it with Cockapelli recently on Kickstarter for 2-player. The 2-player rules were completely changed. And that was a Queen Games one.
Was that
Interesting.
for play testing, do you think? Or?
Well, obviously, over the months they had the money, and as Phil said, it gets developed into a different proposition. It's part of Kickstarter, it's part of the risk, part of the rolling the dice.
It's
So-
part of rolling the dice.
crowdfunding.
There is something else I'd like to ask you about as well, to get your feedback, and actually you at home as well, so if you comment below, I'd like to know. What do you think about Kickstarters that give you a chance to be involved in the game? So, for example...
Imagery on cards.
You can be an image on a card, you can be, I don't know, like in a transport game, you could be a passenger and there'd be a card with your detail on, or you can create a scenario, write a scenario for a game, or you'll be in a rule book, or, all the different possible ways that you can then be involved, quite literally, in the game yourself.
Well, I've got
What are
one.
your feelings
I've got one
about this?
example of where that's happened,
Oh,
and it
interesting.
isn't something that I personally did. But at a certain level, if you backed, I think it was for an extra like $20, you could have an image taken and be on one of the profile cards for a 1950s spy game.
Oh, wow.
And when they showed us the images, they gave us deadline, get your images to us. They were brilliant. Everyone had dressed up, all the backers, they had the hats, the trilbies,
cool.
and the
That's
suits,
brilliant.
and the dresses, and they were all like taken at in certain different angles. It was
Yeah.
really good. So the fact the backers all got involved and
Yeah.
they were on these cards was really good.
That's
so,
brilliant.
yeah, I enjoyed that
I think
experience.
it creates a bit more of a buzz as well.
Yeah,
It creates a
definitely.
community.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
around your game, it creates a huge amount of community.
Have you ever had an experience with that?
No. I offered my services as a model for many game art, and I've been rejected all times.
Was that a hand model film?
Nose model, actually. But no, it's. I kind of love the idea, and like you say, $20 extra is not like that's not a big
No.
spend.
Yeah.
You do sometimes see like $500
Yeah.
as
And
an
your
extra
name in the
pledge,
game.
and your name in the
Yeah.
game. It's like that's just.
I'm proud that my town that I live in is in Brass, Birmingham. So imagine having a picture of yourself in the game.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
That'd be unbearable.
It's disappointing. It's disappointing every time you look at the Brass Birmingham board and realise that, Bromsgrove, the nicer, bigger,
Didn't
more
make
wonderful town, didn't make it.
Never mind.
And Redditch did. I've not
Have
played
you
Brass.
researched as to why that is?
To be fair, it is probably more of an industrial line than Bromsgrove used to be. Although Bromsgrove used to have a steelworks on the train line,
Yeah.
which is next to the canal. Anyway,
So if you know at home,
Leave-
if you could educate us, that'd be great.
He's
Comment
not
below.
bitter. Don't worry.
I don't even come from Bromsgrove. I just live there now. But no, I think that idea of community, like that's when a Kickstarter campaign goes superbly. And I'll reference Dog Park again because actually it did for Dog Park. That community around the game was massive, and it was buzzing constantly.
Yeah.
They
Buzzing.
come up with ideas. I've seen one where people thought the board on Tinner's Trail was too small. Fantastic board game publisher said, "We'll make a bigger board." Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah.
Something so simple. If you don't say anything, the next person doesn't
Yeah.
say anything. It will never change. So by
And
speaking up,
that's the thing with the creators. The creators have to be willing to listen to the feedback. And I
Very
think
much
that's,
so. Yeah.
I've seen a few campaigns, and I won't name names, where actually the creators have constantly basically said, "We're right, you're wrong, sod you."
Oh no, that's not good.
And people are just wanting to see improvements. Now, you don't have to listen to everything your backers say. If you get 10,000 backers back in a project, you're not going to take all 10,000 voices into consideration. But if enough people say the same thing, then listen to them. You are only the custodian of your creation
Yeah.
until you make it public. The minute you make it public, you are there to sort of curate rather than own that creation. You're there to manage the ideas coming in and work with them. And if you want to obsessively own it, then
Kickstarter's not the thing.
Kickstarter's almost certainly not the place for you, because that's if you went down a publisher route, you'd also struggle because the publisher would want to redevelop the game and redevelop the theme, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, no creator owns 100% of their creation.
No.
You do while it's in your idea, but the minute you put it into the public domain, everyone owns a little bit of it, especially when you're asking them for money.
You have to be willing to accept that feedback.
Yeah, and I think if they're paid for it, they've got a right to complain and they've got a right to request updates. It's not an unreasonable request. The downside is Kickstarter never get involved. They haven't got involved in the What's Your Game debacle. Really? They're just saying that we can't get involved. So it's difficult. I think if you're an agency taking a couple of $100,000
from every single...
Yeah, and you're representing that, you're acting as the middleman. I think there's some recourse there somewhere. But picking up on your community element, what I really like is that I've backed people like Dice Tower and Man vs. Meeple and the Secret Cabal, and it's about that community feel you get from them. So it's not just for games, it's to say you're doing a good job, you really like the content, and if you enjoy something, you want to help fund it going, keep it going. A lot of it's done through Patreon, I believe. There's a lot of Patreon accounts out there, I hear people mentioning. But yeah, it's not just for games, it's to enjoy content that you like as well.
Yeah, I think Kickstarter and the volume of games on Kickstarter, and if we talk very briefly about the way I would see things moving, is it's board games are still very much in their infancy. Like we are seeing companies like Asmodee take a bigger and bigger slice of the market as they buy and merge and amalgamate a lot of other people into them. However, it's still a young. The idea of modern board games as this explosion continues, there's still a lot of growth within the sector to be had, and the fact that it's so prevalent on Kickstarter tells me that there's still a lot of creation out there and creative people out there who have projects they want to bring to life, and Kickstarter is still, and I hope for a while yet, will remain a really useful outlet to get those projects out into the world. As board games become more professionalize themselves more, as we get more larger organisations dominating the marketplace, there'll be less and less scope for the independent. For a passion project will have to go through the production channels.
Yeah, that's a shame.
And there'll still be places where people can break through, but it'll become harder and harder to do so. So I think at the moment and for the foreseeable future, I want to see Kickstarter still be a domain where creative people have the opportunity to bring their project to life. That's my own sort of personal appeal and opinion.
Definitely. It's a nice positive outlook, hopefully. Cool.
Anyone else got anything they'd like to say?
No, just hopefully it will be a positive year for board gaming.
Yes, definitely.
I'm looking forward to some deleries from Kickstarter.
Yes.
Yep.
And I do like to back a Kickstarter and then suddenly have a free gift arrive on my door. To be fair, although it costs a fair whack of money, that's like Kingdom Death feels like now. Suddenly every now and again something turns up at the door and you go, oh yeah.
I forgot that. New toy.
Thank you for your time today. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content from us here.
We're very interested to hear your comments and feedback on your crowdfunding, your Kickstarters, your game fans, etc.
What have you backed?
Yeah,
Tell us.
Comment below, let us know. We might have some similar tastes. We're also on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, so search for us. Just search for Ludus Vulpes. You should be able to find us on there.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.